Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this syracuse.com live chat. My name is Brent Axe. I'm a columnist here at syracuse.com, and today I've got the pleasure of being joined by Syracuse University Athletic Director John Wildhack, who's going to join us to cover a number of Syracuse University sports-related topics. John, first of all, thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Brent. Good to be with you.
So I thought we would just jump right in here. We've got a lot to cover, and start with football. A 7-5 season in the regular season for the Orange. Of course, Sunday night comes the bowl announcement, as we'll talk about here. But let me just start with that. What does a 7-5 season tell you about Syracuse football right now?
I mean, I would define it as progress over last year, right? 5-7 to 7-5. The way we did it was obviously unique. The first half of the season, I think, exceeded everybody's expectations. We got off to a great start, 6-0. Obviously had a great chance at Clemson. Didn't win that. Then we lost 4 in a row. To come back and play, particularly the fourth quarter at BC, I think was as good a quarter offensively and defensively as we played all year. To finish it that way was really important for momentum of this program, to get to 7-5, to improve our bowl position. And I think, to me, one of the key words is perspective. And yes, and we'll get into it, there are things that we need to improve upon, no question. But if you go back to week one, if you look at teams that were ranked in the top 25, and there's about 10 of those teams that we had better records that were ranked in the top 25. Oklahoma, Miami, Michigan State, Texas A&M. There's, I could go down the list, but I won't. But I think perspective is really important. So to me, it was progress. We need to build upon it. It's not that we're satisfied. It's progress, but we need to continue to get this program better in every respect.
So did you and Dino Babers have kind of that usual postseason conversation about how things are going and where they need to go to continue to make that progress? And if so, what did you talk about?
We've had a lot of conversations, and yes, and I think to me is we've got to look at every element of the program and how we get better in every element, right? And I think one area in particular, we were riddled with injuries this year. The Wake Forest game, I think I looked at one point, I think we were missing 9 out of the 22 starters from the Louisville game, week 1.
That's right.
That can't happen. Injuries are going to happen, but we need to really look, and it's not that we're doing things wrong, but how do we enhance and improve, right? Strength, conditioning, rehab, recovery, restorative, nutrition, all elements of that. What can we do better? I think that's really, really important. Obviously, recruiting is critical. Our coaches are out. They went out on the road today. All of them are out there. They'll be out there, basically the majority of the month, as long as, is they're allowed by NCAA rules. And recruiting is important, not only with high school, but also with the portal and with JUCOs as well. So, there's a lot, we need to work on. Penalties are an issue, let's face it. And you're going to make physical penalties, right? You watch the Bills-Patriots last night, you see guys are going to hold. There's going to be pass interference, illegal block in the backs, that type of thing. It's the mental errors, right? The false starts, right? Things like that. We need to minimize those. So there's a lot of areas to improve upon. At the same time, as I do think, undeniably, we made progress over last year.
How would you define what progress would be going forward in 2023? On top of, you could win another game, get to 8-5, and that maybe sets another standard. But what's the definition of progress starting next season?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, you look at win-loss, but it's not just all on win and loss, right? You go back to this year, I think most preseason pundits, had us winning maybe 4 or 5 games, right? 12th toughest schedule in the country. To me, next year is, the progress is going to be, where have we improved in the areas that I just mentioned, right? Can we reduce penalties, right? The mental errors that we make. There are elements, there's times this year we need to be more disciplined, right? We can't force a turnover and then get flagged for, unsportsmanlike conduct because of an excessive celebration. You can't have that. The self-inflicted wounds, you need to minimize those. You're never going to eliminate them. You watch the conference championship games this weekend. You watch the NFL on Sunday. There's mental errors made all over, but you need to minimize those. I do think, recruiting, and we beefed up our recruiting staff last year. We're going to continue to do that. So I think where we can invest in the program and invest smartly, as I mentioned, I think strength, conditioning, nutrition, where we can tailor, more for the individual athlete, what they need in terms of their nutrition. We will have a licensed dietitian, on staff by mid-January, that will work, which will supplement what we do now. What we already do now in our dining area is very comprehensive, but we're going to make it better. And we think if we make it better, little things can really matter. And if you look at our defensive line, they're young, right? They're talented. If we can put the right kind of weight on some of those kids, they can be really, really good players.
So just to clarify, John, that's an addition to what you have now.
Correct.
Somebody that's specific in that area.
Yes.
Okay. Next year is year 8 for Dino Babers. Have you and Coach discussed a contract extension beyond his current deal?
I don't get into anybody's, individual employment agreements with the university. Obviously, that's confidential. I respect the question, but that's confidential information.
In your view, do you want to see Dino Babers coach beyond year 8 into year 9, year 10? Do you think he deserves to do that?
I hope he does, because that means we're having success.
Why? I understand the details of the contract and the privacy of that, but doesn't it send a stronger message that this is our coach for the long term that helps some of those things that you were mentioning with recruiting and everything? If there's a stabilization, if people know what the contract status is.
I think how we could communicate to our recruits is this is a program that does have stability. Again, I think the assistant coaches that Dino brought in, but at the same time, I'm not gonna predict or project the long term right now. If we continue to improve this program, he'll be the coach, right? And that's, to me, that's the focus. How do we get better? If we get better, we'll have the success. Dino will be the coach. His staff, hopefully, will retain the majority of his staff. We like the staff. They've done a good job. But all that starts with, how do we get better?
That's another question, John. In this era of, like you said, we're into the transfer portal, and there's a lot of things happening now as we're sort of in the off season ahead of bowl games. Have there been any conversations about some assistant coaches that have been contacted by other schools, shown interest in other schools, or do you have your firm staff with you going into this bowl game?
I think, as we sit here today, and again, things can change in this business in a second, as
Right.
you know, as we sit here today, I think we have stability amongst our staff.
Sunday night is the bowl announcement, and certainly you can kind of see where it's going because there's certain relationships that the league has with bowl games. But to this point, who have you talked to, and what can you tell us ahead of Sunday night?
I think it'll be official probably Sunday. I think between 3 and 5 is when we'll find out. I've had conversations with the ACC. I've had conversations with a couple of bowls. Again, I think it's I've got to respect the process to play out, but I think we've got a pretty clear picture in terms of what our options are.
And just to reiterate for people that haven't heard, we do know one game you will not go to, and that's the Fenway Bowl, which is in that ACC window. But academics certainly takes priority in a way there, John. And you said earlier this week that bumps into finals week, so we do know the Fenway Bowl's out.
Correct. And we told the ACC that 4 months ago. And when we looked at the calendar, and the conference reached out to every school and said, hey, Fenway Bowl's December 17th. We need to know what schools can and can't play in it. Conflicts with finals. So we went back to the ACC immediately, said we can't play in that because we're not going to mess around with finals. Once
you find out what bowl game you're in, what advice would you have for fans that want to go to that game, that want to be a part of that game? Because, you find out Sunday night, and then you got to make that decision and go.
I think log on to syracuse.com, because once we know where we're going, if you log on to syracuse.com, we'll have ticket information. It'll be right on the homepage.
And there's when it comes to tickets, people ask about this all the time because there's so many ways to get tickets. If they want to sit with Syracuse fans, is that the best way? Is that the best procedure to make sure that they're sitting with their fellow fans?
Yes, that's a really good point. Is you log on to syracuse.com, and that's going to greatly enhance your opportunity to sit with Syracuse fans.
Okay, John, let's move on to men's basketball here. A 3-4 start for this team. What are your concerns, saying where they're at right now?
Yeah, I think, listen, it's, we're all disappointed in the start. I think we sit back, a month ago, it would probably be 10 games until this team kind of gets a feel, right? And the coaches get a feel for what the rotation is. We've lost a couple of close games. Obviously, the Illinois game got away early in the second half. They're really good. And it's growing pains, and it's been painful to some extent, and nobody's happy with it. It's still relatively early in the season, but at the same time, we've got to start winning games. We've got a great opportunity at Notre Dame tomorrow. Again, they're a good, experienced team. Mike Bray's teams always play really good offense. Comes down to we've got to have we need guys to step up, to play at a high level, and we need to win games.
What's the feedback been like for you from fans, from alums, from everybody that you hear from?
I think people are disappointed and frustrated, and I think the team's disappointed. The coaches are disappointed. We all expect better, and when you don't have success, it's the players and the coaching staffs, regardless of the sport. They take it the hardest, and we've not been. I say we, right? Our fan base, our community, we've not experienced things like this, right? We've lived a charmed life when it comes to men's basketball, but we've got to figure out a way to turn it around and win games.
Jim Boeheim says a lot that all that matters is the tournament. Do you share that opinion with him?
I think yes, to a large extent, yes. Ultimately, is the sport the way it's structured now, and I'm not sure it's ultimately the best for the sport, Brent. But the focus is all on March. It really is. And the regular season is just a pathway to get there. You got to get enough wins to get in the tournament. And then you get in the tournament, and if you can make a run, that really defines your season. Again, I'm not sure that's really good for the sport overall in terms of fan avidity throughout the season. I think college football has got the best regular season because every week is so vitally important. Where college basketball, it's all, hey, you know what, get on a run, make the tournament. You get in the tournament, what can you do?
Tournament is interesting because this team has 4 non-conference losses, and as you know, the emphasis the selection committee puts on that. So that might have lost that window and that opportunity for quality non-conference losses. It puts an emphasis now on, it starts Saturday, as you mentioned, with Notre Dame in ACC games. What's the path for this team to still carve out a legitimate NCAA tournament resume?
We have to have a really strong ACC season because you're right. Illinois was a great opportunity. St. John's was a great opportunity. We weren't successful there, so we've got to make up for it in the ACC. And we're gonna have plenty of chances in the ACC, but we need to capitalize on those. But our margins narrowed, right? No question about that.
John, tell me why you think Jim Boeheim is still the best coach for Syracuse basketball.
I think his number one is his knowledge of the game, his wisdom of the game, his passion for basketball, his passion for Syracuse, for this program. That just doesn't evaporate. You just don't lose that overnight. And I get it. People are frustrated, with our start this year. But I think his track record, speaks for itself. And we've had slow starts in the past, and we've turned those around, and we've had really good ACC or Big East regular seasons and have made the tournament, gotten into a run. As I've said before, Jim Boeheim has earned, I think, a tremendous amount of equity in what he's accomplished here and what he's meant to this community. And I think people need to be respectful of that.
I think people are respectful of that, but still kind of wonder what the future holds. And, Jim, actually, he called my radio show a few months ago, and he brought up this ironclad succession plan in his words. What is that plan?
Well, again, I'm not going to, Jim and I have talked about the future of the program, and we've talked about it numerous times. And, I'm not going to get into any details per se, but it's important to him that he wants to leave this program in a place where it can have success. He wants it to have sustained success, and we will, we're going to work towards that. But again, the details of those conversations are between Coach Boeheim and me.
So you have had those conversations. You do know what the plan is going forward. Is this a situation where it's an in-house advancement, or would you consider people outside of the Syracuse coaching staff?
I wouldn't come to any conclusions. We've had conversations, but I wouldn't come to any conclusions in terms of, where the successor may come from.
I guess my question to follow that up would be, what's the advantage of keeping that in-house at this point?
I think there's the advantage is you have someone who knows our program, knows the culture of the program, knows our recruiting territories, knows where we've had success in our recruiting territories, has had success with this program, so I think there are advantages that way. The culture of the university, culture of the community. But you can also look at somebody from the outside, right? And somebody who's a sitting head coach who's had success. And whenever you hire anyone, Brett, and I've hired a lot of people in my career, there's never a surefire, right, hire.
Sure.
You think nobody's ever hired somebody that they didn't think was going to do a good job, but you're dealing with human beings, and there is nothing, there is no foolproof when it comes to it. You're gonna be hires that you make that don't turn out well. There's gonna be hires that, geez, I'm not sure, that turn out to be great. But that's when you're dealing with human beings. That's what you do.
I guess the other side of that would be, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but certainly one that we saw play out last year. We knew John Shire was going to take over for Mike Krzyzewski, as an example. There was a succession plan here back in the day with Mike Hopkins,
right,
which of course, didn't work out because he got another job and got another opportunity. So do you see that could work the other way? Is there an advantage to let everybody know what the future is going to be?
I think in some ways, if you're going to do that and the decision is to do it from in-house, I think at the appropriate time, providing clarity in that regard could be helpful. So that could be an advantage if you keep it in-house. But again, no one should be presume here that any decision's been made.
John, Jim even mentioned this week that one of the reasons maybe they were not as aggressive in the transfer portal this past offseason was a lot of those players were getting paid maybe in a range where, you got to think about that. And it shows how quickly this world has advanced in name, image, and likeness. So let's look at that in the transfer portal and name, image, likeness. As it stands today, what is Syracuse doing to be competitive, to be in that mix in the name, image, and likeness race, so you are in those conversations more often than not?
Well, we're in number one, we support opportunities for our student athletes to participate in NIL, and in particularly the way NIL was intended. What we've not gotten into is, we're getting into bidding wars for players. We haven't done that. I don't want to do that. But we've had over 100 athletes do deals, primarily with locally based companies, right? And it's very easy for companies to associate and work with our student athletes. It can be through appearances, it could be through commercials, it could be through campaigns, it could be through social media posts, et cetera, that type of thing. We've also got two collectives, the 315 Foundation. 315 Foundation is real easy. You go to 315foundation.org. That's their website. If I'm a donor, I'm a supporter, I'm passionate about men's basketball, I can contribute whatever amount I want. It goes to men's basketball. In return, the player has to perform a documented charitable activity that the donor then receives notification of. So it's a very simple transaction. So we have that, the 315foundation.org, and the other is Athletes Who Care.
And Athletes Who Care is focused primarily initially on football and men's and women's lacrosse. Co-founder is Cliff Ensley, who's our last 3-sport letter winner here. Very similar. Is businesses will work with with the Athletes Who Care, the athletes who perform a charitable function. We've had football players down serving meals at the Samaritan Center a couple times, et cetera, that type of thing. The players are compensated. Most schools around the country have something similar like this, Brent. We have it. We need to have it. We need to be competitive in the NIL space. Number one, for attention. And that's, everybody mentions recruiting. Well, the first thing is you got to retain your best. And one of the keys to retaining your best is to make sure that there's NIL opportunities for them. And then that dovetails into recruiting.
John, recently Adam Weitzman put out a $1 million offer for a 5-star football player, a 5-star basketball player. So the collectives are there, and that's something that is an option here, but we're still very young in the process here. When you hear something like that, what's your reaction when you hear that that's out there trying to attract talent to Syracuse University?
Yeah, I think, number one, I mean, the reality is you're not going to get a 5-star football quarterback for $1 million. You're not.
We're thinking bigger.
We'll think, look what Ryan Day said a few months ago. Quarterback, $2.5 million. So that's the reality we're dealing with. So Adam's been great, and he's been very supportive of both men's football, men's basketball, football, supporting women's basketball as well. So there are different ways, that Adam can help us. And the one thing that I'll give Adam credit for before he does anything, he always checks with our compliance office. So anything that he does, make sure that's done appropriately. And we need supporters like Adam. And it may not be, again, NIL, you can be supportive at any level. It can be kind of grassroots, $5 or $10, or it can be somebody, if they have the wherewithal, they want to contribute more, they can do that.
Do you feel like you have some supporters, some donors, some people that can pay the going rate for a 5-star quarterback?
I'm not sure that we want to do that, and I'm not sure that's in talking with Coach Babers and Jim. We'd rather, frankly, spread around the NIL opportunities, to a majority of the roster, right, on basketball. And all right, you got 85 football scholarships. It may not be all 85, but it may be, the 55 and it's 60, 55 or 60 players who are really, really contributors. So we're more, and I think most schools candidly have that philosophy. The headlines that you read about are kind of more the outliers, right? And the results of those who are the outliers, it's not always worked so far, right? Go back to a couple of schools that I referenced earlier on, right, in their football performance this year. They were very active and they were very vocal, right, in the NIL space and transfer portal, et cetera, that type of thing. And neither of those teams are going to bowl games.
John, just a couple more things here I wanted to cover with you before we end our chat here. You've got a team that's playing for a Final Four bid on Saturday here at Syracuse. They call it the College Cup in the world of men's soccer. Tell me how Coach McIntyre has built a program that could have its second Final Four bid here since 2015.
I think it's the culture of the team, and culture at times is overused, but this team's a really, really close team. They're very good defensively. We're very good in goal with Russell. We've got forwards who can score. It's a complete team, Brent, and they play really well with one another. You can tell the respect, the love and support they have for one another. So it's been a great ride. 2 p.m. tomorrow at the soccer stadium. We hope to sell it out. Vermont's going to be tough. We played them earlier this year to a draw. They're big. They're really physical. It's going to be a really physical game, but I'm really proud of what Coach McIntyre and his staff and the team's accomplished. It's been fun.
Coach Felicia Leggett-Jack in the young days here as the head coach at women's basketball, but just what have been your impressions so far now that we've seen some games? I mean, her energy is certainly apparent through the offseason and kind of, being out there and being very enthusiastic about this job and being so glad to be home. But now that we've seen some basketball, what's your assessment?
I think, it's similar in some ways to men's basketball, right? You've got so many new players, right? It's going to take them 10 games to kind of figure out how to play with one another. The one thing that's really clear is our backcourt, Deasia Fair and Tisha Hyman. That's a high level backcourt. That's as good a backcourt as there is in the ACC. We got way behind against Purdue, made a great run the other night, came up short. The ACC is going to be brutal, but if we can finish in the upper half of the ACC, I think that'd be a terrific first season.
And John, last thing from me, we had a number of readers that were kind of wondering what's going on with the seats at the JMA Wireless Dome and when those new seats will be in and just kind of the latest in the renovations going on there.
Yeah, so Brent, we hope to have an announcement later this month, and the objective would be to have the chairback seats installed, which would be throughout the entire building, throughout the JMA Dome, and the goal would be to do it for fall football 2024, and look for an announcement later this month on that. That'll offer more detail.
Great, we'll keep an eye out for that. John, thank you so much for your time and your insight here. We appreciate you being willing to do this, and happy holidays to you and everybody.
Thanks, Brent. My pleasure. Happy holidays to our fans, and go Orange.